Okay, our first testimony this afternoon is coming in via Zoom link. Dr. Priyanka Bandara is an independent researcher and educator in environmental health. As a former academic, clinical, and basic researcher, Westmead and Royal Prince Alfred hospitals, as well as medicine at University of Sydney, she gained experience in hepatology, biochemistry, and molecular genetics and molecular pharmacology. Dr. Bandara also served as senior manager in the UNSW health system, coordinating a dynamic research team and a clinical team at Westmead Children's Hospital. She subsequently became involved in environmental health, realizing the greater need to focus on prevention of chronic diseases rather than on intervention. She studied genetic regulation of cellular oxidative stress responses for her doctoral thesis at UNSW in the late 1990s, and it's continued her interest in this area, pathologically involved in almost every disease, investigating cytotoxic effects of various environmental pollutants via complex cellular pathways. She furthers the understanding of the health impact of our changing world. Dr. Bandara has a keen interest in the biological health effects of currently permitted, quote, low levels, unquote, of microwave radiofrequency electromagnetic radiation, widely generated for mobile and wireless communication and surveillance technologies and released into the environment. Despite being heavily marketed, these technologies have not been subjected to adequate safety testing, and the current regulation is entirely based on short-term heating effects. Dr. Bandara collaborates with a large group of scientists and clinicians around the world who are trying to educate health authorities and the public about safer use of wireless tech, bring about more protective exposure guidelines for man-made electromagnetic radiation. She's a strong advocate for stringent control of environmental toxicants, including wireless radiation, to mainly safeguard more vulnerable children. Dr. Bandara has published in international peer-reviewed scientific journals and presented at major conferences in leading Australian academic institutions. She is an executive member of the Oceania Radiofrequency Scientific Advisory Association, ORSAA, a member of the scientific advisory boards of the Environmental Health Trust USA. We're good. Dr. Bandara, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. May I begin?
Yes, please.
I'm a former academic and I want to share my screen. I'm a former academic and basic researcher, now operating as an independent health researcher on non-profit basis. My solemn testimonial addresses the serious problem of rapidly increasing electromagnetic pollution across the globe and all the way into space. This is going to be with catastrophic impact levels to the biosphere with the upcoming 5G wireless technology and the Internet of Things. I'm a subject matter expert in this field and one of the 247 signatories from 42 countries who have petitioned the WHO, the World Health Organization, and the UN for immediate measures to protect the health and well-being of humans and other species from man-made electromagnetic fields. I have no financial conflicts of interest, and I have campaigned against electropollution at enormous financial and personal sacrifice because I have seen the scientific evidence showing that this can cause a collapse in the human civilization and a man-made ecological disaster of unprecedented proportions. In this presentation, I would like to introduce you to electropollution and share with you just a small fraction of the credible scientific evidence of harm that exists. Let me start with this introductory video to the International EMF Scientist Appeal.
I'm here with disturbing news about our favorite gadgets, cell phones, tablets, Wi-Fi, etc. Putting it bluntly, they are damaging the living cells in our bodies and killing many of us prematurely. I'm Dr. Martin Blank from the Department of Physiology and Cellular Biophysics at Columbia University. It is distressing for me and more than 160 colleagues who today are petitioning the United Nations requesting that they address this problem. We are scientists and engineers, and I am here to tell you we have created something that is harming us, and it is getting out of control. Before Edison's light bulb, there was very little electromagnetic radiation in our environment. The levels today are very many times higher than natural background levels and are growing rapidly because of all the new devices that emit this radiation. An example that a lot of us have in our pockets right now is the cell phone. One study shows that as cell phone usage has spread widely, the incidence of fatal brain cancer in younger people has more than tripled. We are putting cellular antennas on residential buildings and on top of hospitals where people are trying to get well. Wireless utility meters and cell towers are blanketing our neighborhoods with radiation. It's particularly frightening that radiation from our telecommunication and power line technology is damaging the DNA in our cells. It is clear to many biologists that this can account for the rising cancer rates. Future generations, our children, are at risk. These biologists and scientists are not being heard on the committees that set safety standards. The biological facts are being ignored, and as a result, the safety limits are much too high. They are not protective. More protection will probably result from full disclosure of possible conflicts of interest between regulators and industry. Rising exposure to electromagnetic radiation is a global problem. The World Health Organization and international standard-setting bodies are not acting to protect the public's health and well-being. International exposure guidelines for electromagnetic fields must be strengthened to reflect the reality of their impact on our bodies, and in particular, on our DNA. Although we are still in the midst of a great technological transformation, the time to deal with the harmful biological and health effects is long overdue. We are really all part of a large biological experiment without our informed consent. To protect our children, ourselves, and our ecosystem, we must reduce exposure by establishing more protective guidelines. And so today, scientists from around the world are submitting an appeal to the United Nations, its member states, and the World Health Organization to provide leadership in dealing with this emerging public health crisis.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. The International EMF Scientist Appeal, launched in 2015, has now collected 247 scientists from 42 countries. But unfortunately, it has so far been ignored. Thank you for listening to that introductory message from Dr. Martin Blank, an eminent scientist who resisted the system to show us the scientific evidence of harm of artificial electromagnetic fields. He passed away last year, aged 85, as a true hero of humanity. And I consider that it is my duty to continue the investigations started by eminent scientists like Dr. Blank, exposing the inconvenient truths that we must act on for the common good. The wireless industry and the governments that profit from this global trillion-dollar industry not only ignore and suppress the evidence of harm, but also attempt to discredit the scientists who dare to report them. Let me now show you the sheer magnitude of this problem. Now, this figure is from a publication I did last year, and I must give credit to electrical engineer Alistair Phillips of UK, who helped me with this figure to give a very good idea as to the extent of electropollution that has been caused by wireless technology deployment across the globe. Now, when it comes to electromagnetic pollution, radio frequency or wireless radiation is only one part of that problem. And here we are only looking at that. And in this green area, it shows the natural background level. And this is the nature's quiet zone that we have abused with the addition of artificial electromagnetic radiation. This is radio frequency or microwave radiation. And this had increased rapidly in the last few decades. And now typically we have exposures about 10 to the 18 times more than natural exposure levels. That is more than a billion times. Okay, the current exposure regulation is entirely thermally based. And they're based on outdated 1990s guidelines of the International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, ICNIRP, and the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. Now, these are pro-industry organizations with no public accountability. Users of wireless devices, such as mobile phones, have no idea that the safety testing of these devices have been done in plastic heads like this one for just 6 minutes, only for heating. Let's look at the ICNIRP. It's a closed group of up to 14 commissioners appointed by themselves. No scientist who stand by the evidence of harm is invited into this group. They are mostly physicists, physical scientists with financial links to the industry. The unit at the WHO that investigates the health impact of electropollution, called the International EMF Project, only endorses the views of the ICNIRP. Intriguingly, both organizations had the same person as the founding head for years. This WHO unit, which should be about health, is headed not by a medically trained person, as one would expect, but by an electrical engineer with strong industry links. Both the International EMF Project and the WHO and ICNIRP simply continue to ignore the evidence of harm and mislead the populations across the world with strong media presence. As to my claim that the current exposure guidelines can only protect against short-term heating effects, here's the confirmation from the US EPA. You can read the letter in full later, which I can provide. And now, what about the biological effects that occur with low levels of radio frequency radiation? These have been detailed in thousands of peer-reviewed publications, as well as reports from governments, industry, independent expert groups, as well as the International Agency for Research on Cancer, a separate arm of the WHO. It is not surprising that electromagnetic radiation influences our health when we are complex electrochemical beings by electricity that drives every form of life on Earth, with electrical activity at cellular level, has been harnessed in both Eastern and Western medicine for millennia. For example,